Hey there, I'm Roxanne Webster.
And I'm Keith Alba. We are the owners and partners at my home team in Colorado at Keller Williams Advantage.
This is the Honest Hour, gang. You know the routine. Hit
It,
the subscribe button, the share button, and the little
notification
notification
button.
bell. Yep,
It.
this is little Mabel. She is here to help me because I was just eating pizza. Whatever. She loves me for my pizza. Keith Alba, what are we talking about today? It's a good one.
Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk. There's starting to get some more news out there, some more discussions, and maybe it's just in our world as real estate agents, but it definitely affects the consumers. So we figured it was going to be, a good topic to kind of bring up on this honest hour. And it's going to be about these off-market, private exclusives, whisper listings, kind of whatever you want to necessarily call these things. They're all going by different names in different areas. But wanted to talk about, is it a good idea? Is it something to be explored, or is it potentially harming you as a seller when you're trying to take your house to the market?
So, for clarity, what we're talking about is when people, just the average consumer, thinks of an off market listing. This is what we're talking about.
Right, an off-market listing, and technically something that just doesn't get entered into the full MLS,
That's
right? So
right.
it's not being broadcast out to all the other real estate agents and their clients that are within that MLS. It's not being syndicated to those portals that are out there. So it's not going to hit Zillow or Trulia or Redfin or any of those. Those all get fed from the public or the full MLS. These ones are these private networks, like an internal brokerage firm, sort of mini MLS, maybe, I guess is one way I would kind of describe it. But
It's really interesting because when I think of who would want that, who of our clients would be interested in that? Well, you and I both get 20 texts a week from investors saying, "Hey, do you have any off-market properties?" They're asking because they know that once that house is exposed to competition, it's likely going to sell for more money.
yeah, and there's a big battle going on right now behind the scenes in the real estate industry, right? You've got this really large national brokerage firm that is really pushing and promoting this avenue, saying,
Their,
hey,
their names
come
shall
to us.
remain nameless, but their initials are Compass, right? I said it. Yeah.
Sounds like Bumpus, right? But they're really pushing this out there and they're saying, hey, this is a great avenue. And for you as a seller, you get to quote unquote test the market, bring your property to a limited market and get some feedback from the potential consumers
And
on
it's more
pricing,
exclusive.
condition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very limited piece. Um, and there's different states, right? And different MLSs all have different rules on whether these are allowed, what needs to happen if it's going to go in. Here in Colorado, from my research, it seems like the only avenue we get to go through is what's called a private exclusive, a private brokerage exclusive. So it still gets entered into the main Denver MLS under this private exclusive, but the only people that can see it would be other licensees from our brokerage firm, and then they can share it from there. Whereas some of these networks are just simply within the brokerage firm that can be able to see it, and sometimes they have their own websites or portals set up for buyers of those agents that are a part of the brokerage to serve those or to
Maybe you
research
could
those things.
explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old. How on earth does that benefit the seller?
And honestly, on what I wanted to bring to the table today is that there are different studies that have come out in this stuff. Zillow has put out a study, and then Bright MLS, which is services the mid-Atlantic area, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Delaware, some of those kind of states and on the East Coast in the middle area, the mid-Atlantic area. They also put out a research, and they said that it actually does not help the consumers out there. In fact, it harms them. In one study showing a 1.5% reduction in the sales price, right? Depending on your area of the country and how high the prices are being sold. In California, that loss could be over $30,000. for going down this avenue and restricting the buyers that can actually see the property and potentially buy it.
It's interesting. I think that in this kind of TikTok age, when we hear words like exclusive or private,
Right.
it sounds luxury. It sounds swanky, right? But at the end of the day, this is a good old fashioned supply and demand thing. If you have fewer buyers looking at your product is worth less. Period.
Well, you have fewer fewer buyers competing for it, right? And
That's
so
right.
I think that's where the biggest issue is, you know, this brokerage firm had put out, well, they put out a press release stating the results of their own study, saying opposite of what Bright and Zillow's research had said. But interestingly enough, they have yet to release the actual study itself. So it's one of those, believe me, just don't look behind the curtain sort of a thing, right? And
Right.
my favorite saying that you love so much, right? Never trust a statistic that you haven't manipulated yourself.
Right?
Um,
Right?
feels like that's what's going on here is, hey, listen, our study shows that this is in the best interest and that kind of stuff. But with you and my experience in this, when you reduce the buyer pool or the people that you're marketing to, it restricts that demand that you're talking about, which when you do anything that restricts the demand, that's absolutely going to have a price or effect on the final sales price, which means equity for the seller, which means, less money that they're walking away from the table with, and all to what benefit? My opinion, I think it's to the benefit of the brokerage firm that's
I
pushing you
think
in
so
that
too.
direction,
I think so
right?
too.
Because now they've got this captured inventory, and then they can go out and they can go to their buyers and say, "Hey, listen, because you're with us, you're the only ones that get to look at this sort of a thing for this period of time." So there's a bit of a conflict of interest, in my opinion, of saying,
Those
"Hey,
buyers might
come."
well get a better deal because the seller's leaving money on the table.
Yeah, the buyers, it might be beneficial to the buyers. It might be beneficial to the listing agent, right? Because they may be able to pick up the other side of that transaction, and now they're
And
getting
thus the
both the
brokerage
buy
firm.
and the sale side.
Yeah,
Right. The brokerage firm gets a cut of that. So the larger the dollar amounts that the agent's receiving as commission, the better, monies they can receive as a part of their employment agreement with that agent. Just a lot of conflicts of interest that's there. Now, I do want to say, and I want to get it out there on the table, there are absolutely reasons to go down that path,
yeah,
right? You want privacy. You don't want have to keep the property show ready. You're just looking for a quick sale to get out, but you don't want to have to do the prep work and stuff going forward. Those are just a few examples of when it may make sense.
that's right.
But in
That's right.
those
It's like
scenarios, make sure that the agent that you're talking to is explaining of saying, hey, we're going to restrict this buyer pool. So we can still get a potential buyer, but we may be leaving money on the table in exchange for you not having to do this initial pre-listing work.
here are the pros and the cons. And there's a couple of thoughts that I have on this. One is it kind of makes me again think about how much conflicting information people get, right? And at times, if you got somebody from that brokerage firm who shall remain nameless trying to sell you on this in a listing appointment, then I come a couple hours later and I tell you my song and dance. Who's right? Who's telling the truth, right? I think that when one looks at this type of thing, what makes sense, right? If I'm selling a pair of shoes and I've got one potential buyer who will just come and ask me if I'll take $10, that's what I've got a choice. Am I going to take the $10 or not? If I've got five people who love that pair of shoes and each one of them really wants it, I'm not going to get $10 for that pair of shoes. One of those people is going to say, I'll pay 15 for it. The other one said, well, I'll give you 17 for it. And then the last one says, I'll give you 20 for it, right? It just makes sense that if you've got more people interested in your product, that's going to force the value of it. So that's the first thought I have around this. The second thought was really good. It was so good. Uh, uh, and I'm sure it will come back. I'm sure that one will
Yeah.
come back.
I think it's just, and probably the
Oh,
intent
I got it.
behind this video today. Okay.
I remember it. All right. I was thinking about remember that listing appointment we did up in the foothills a couple of years ago, and it was spectacular house. This guy had built it himself. Beautiful workmanship, unique home, beautiful little valley that it was in. But it had been built 65 years ago, and every single inch of it needed updating, right? So this was a spectacular parcel, and there was nothing to compare its price to. That we couldn't find any data, nothing to compare it to. And a part of our pricing strategy on that was to throw it open to an exclusive, there's that word, a group of investors, and hold it open for those investors over the course of a weekend without giving them a price, right? Just saying, hey, what would you pay for this? And guess what? Those investors, they've got a much better idea, those flippers, of what it's going to cost them to fix up this house, because it could well have been a $250,000 upgrade because every inch of this house needed. So that was a case where we strategically were seeking the feedback of the market to help us in pricing the property. But when we were helping to do that, that was for the benefit of the seller, so that we could tell the
Right.
seller this is what we think this house will sell for if we sell it to investors. And we've had 8 investors give us the same opinion without any of us giving them any clues. So we were doing it in the service of the seller's best interest, right? Who do you represent?
Yeah, and I think that's the huge thing, and where I think some of these agents may be getting themselves in trouble in hot water is by not clearly disclosing. And we went into that full transparency with that seller is,
That's right.
hey, it's going to
This was
be a
a
limited
strategy and
market.
why.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. It's a limited market. We're going after these people because they're the only ones that really have the wherewithal that are going to be able to get this place into a condition where another buyer is going to want to do it.
that's
Unless
right.
you, seller and family, want to dump the 200,000 into it and claim those gains after the repairs have been made. But they weren't interested in that. They were just looking to get rid of that asset from the estate and then,
Yeah.
move on with the closing of probate and things along those lines. So
So
again,
what
yeah,
are the
there's
biggest
definitely
legal concerns?
scenarios.
Yeah. What are the big
Scenario.
legal concerns you have about this? Yeah,
Well, I think exactly that, the lack of transparency or the lack of actually discussing it and just saying, hey, this is what's in your best interest. Well, it might be shiny, it might be new, it's got that, buzzword of exclusivity, but really the only time you get any benefit from the exclusive stuff is behind the red velvet ropes at the nightclubs or something along those lines, right? For real estate, in the majority of the cases, you want to bring it out to the full market because the definition of fair market is what is a buyer willing to pay and what is a seller willing to sell. And when those two things align, that's what the fair market is. When you start artificially reducing one of those pools without the proper disclosure, without the proper buy-in,
it's
you're
distorted.
harming the public to the tunes of thousands of dollars, depending on where you're at.
That's right.
Average was 5 grand. California, it's over $30,000, right? But that's a decision as the property owner, or in our case, in our scenario, the personal representative, they have an obligation to the estate to do the best thing. And so it was, here's your options, here's your pros and cons of these options. What do you want to do? And how do you want to proceed?
That's right.
It's their house, their asset. They should be the one to decide on how it's liquidated if they're looking to sell. Um, and then
Like you
you
say
kind
all
of
the
move forward.
time, our job is to advise, then obey. Educate, advise, obey. Right?
Yeah, advise and consult and follow orders. That's
That's right.
that's what it is. And I have serious concern that the advise and consulting part are seriously lacking, because we are seeing a rise of these. And I would think it would be more of the exception and not the norm to go down this path.
Yeah.
Um, because
Well,
most
and
of the
you know what
time,
keeps me up at night thinking about this is fair housing,
oh yeah, yeah,
right?
and there's some serious concerns that are being raised about that as well in some of these studies, in saying that these private exclusive whisper, off market listings, are definitely adding to potential steering concerns, and abnormally affecting to the negative sellers of protected classes in certain areas of town. And so it's like, wow, it just starts adding up and up and up. And it's gotten to the point where certain states now have put legislation out there that is banning these things unless there is a specific state-approved form that has been signed by that seller saying, I acknowledge that this is not the best way, and proven studies have shown that I'm not going to get the most amount of money this way, and I'm still choosing to go this direction.
That's
Uh,
right.
New York, Washington are two that I can think of off the top of my head that have enacted certain that type of legislation already, um, just to protect those sellers, to let them know and to ensure kind of a forced conversation if it's not happening at the kitchen table of, hey, listen, there's real concerns in going down this path.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I remember when the market, this is the real estate market. Between the two of us, we have uh, Keith and I have combined experience that is almost old enough to apply for Social Security if we just strung the years together. How's that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and in my experience over all these decades is that there's always a new thing, there's and it often starts with a need, right? With a hole to be filled. Um,
Hmm.
and an example of that would be some of the platforms that have popped up in the last 15 years where they will buy your house as is, no questions asked, right? These services. Well, and there's absolutely a place for that service. There are times, with a probate deal, with somebody who needs a
Job
fast sale.
transfers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Where you have to just get out of there. You don't want to do anything to it. But there's a cost to that. The cost to that is that you're leaving some money on the table, right? That that doesn't mean we're not going to discuss these options with our sellers, even though we think that they may not be in their best interest. Guess what? It isn't always about money. And we won't know if it's about money for that client unless we ask them a lot of good questions and let them tell us what's the most important thing, give them the options that solves for those problems, and then let them make a decision.
That's it. And that's advise, consult, and follow directions, right? But that
That's right.
advising and consulting piece up front is where I think, well, like we've talked about before, there's a lot of agents that have never experienced this type of market that we're in, right? And so they're going after the buzzwords or what they think is going to get the seller to agree to using them. So they're using some of these buzzwords, but failing to continue that conversation and saying, hey, this is an option, but here's the pluses and minuses about going down that path. I
A word
personally
keeps
still think,
bouncing. Go ahead.
I said personally for me, for the majority of the clients that we're going to be dealing with, it's bring it onto the MLS. Coming soon status is different than what we're discussing in this office exclusives, whisper off market sort of a thing.
That's a couple
Coming
days.
soon hits the
Yeah.
Yeah, it hits the MLS, it gets blasted out to everybody. It just restricts the showing. In my opinion, it can be used very well to start building up interest, to build demand, to kind of get people excited about
And
that
there's a
property.
time
And then
limit.
once you
Yeah.
release the floodgates to allow for showing, you get some stuff. Yeah, we're limited to 1 week in coming soon status max,
Yeah.
where the MLS will automatically flip it to an active status versus the coming soon. But a few days of coming soon, a week of coming soon to build up that interest, to potentially build up demand, get a lot of people coming through that front door when the market or when the property first hits the market. I'm okay with that. That's completely different than these extended month, 45 day sort of off market sort of a thing. Let's let the market tell us what it's worth. Let's let a limited market tell you what it's worth, maybe, but be honest about what you're actually doing is you're trying to get a full picture of the buyer market in a reduced sample
Base on
size.
reduce sample size. That's exactly it. And I keep thinking of fiduciary, the word fiduciary, and there's a lot of different definitions. I can open up and you hangs with lawyers will have a better definition. But when I think of the behavior for me, what being a fiduciary means that if a decision or some advice that I'm getting or a conversation or a situation if there's a choice between my personal best interests and my client's best interests have to win. They have to be put first. That's what it means for me to be a fiduciary, right? That
Yeah.
that if I remember when I first started in real estate 100 years ago, I would go to my old employing broker and I'd say, "Hey, I'm getting ready to advise this client to do this. Is that because I'm broke and I need this paycheck, or because it's the right thing to do? It's in their best." I was so distorted and so tilted that I couldn't separate my own motivation and well-being, right? And he always says something. He goes, just the fact that you're asking that means that you're on the right track, right? And that's why we do have employing brokers and so forth. And like you said, we haven't been in a market like this for a long time. And I think that sometimes realtors lose track of the fact that our fiduciary responsibility is to serve the best interests of our clients. So we need to understand what those interests are. We need to explain clearly what all these things, how they can impact them, and then let them make a decision.
That's it. I think you nailed it right there.
Yeah, yeah,
If an agent has an agenda that they are trying to push onto their client, that's where it becomes problematic.
that's right.
And you're saying, this is what you got to do. This is the only option. This is the best way to go. And there's a benefit to me in going that, and I'm failing to disclose that as well. That's a problem. And likely you've hired the wrong agent.
Yep.
Um,
PP
whereas
spanking. Yeah,
yeah, what Rox is explaining there is this is your property, right? Whether you're the buyer or you want it to be your property as the buyer, or you're the seller and you're looking to sell that property. This is yours. You're the one that owns the decisions. You're the one who's going to be making the mortgage payments for the next 15 years or however long you remain in that property. And you have the right to make those decisions and direct the agent in the way that you feel best. In order to accomplish that, you need some information and you need some guidance and you need some pros and cons, so that you can make an informed decision on what works best for you, your priorities, and what you need out of that sale or purchase.
that's right. That's right.
And then it's our job as your agent to do everything in our power to fulfill that.
Well, good luck conversation, sir. Long conversation. Um, this please reminder to hit the subscribe button if you like this content. Share it to folks. Hit the little notification bell and all that good stuff. And you can also click to a whole. We got tons of these. Keith and I love hearing ourselves talk, so we've got lots.
We like seeing ourselves on the big screen.
We look so good, so good. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.